And I think we are live.
All right. Do you want to do a quick round of introductions and just keep an eye on attendees? Usually takes a couple seconds for them to start coming in, doesn't it?
It does. Honestly, we've it's been pretty sparse. I think the attendees for the subgroup meetings. So I'm it usually at this point they would be popping up if they were in the waiting room. So I'm guessing we're might just be the small group here this afternoon.
Well, for the record, we can do introductions. I'm Nick Marquis, Chief Information Officer for the state of Maine, and I'm also the chair of the subcommittee that's meeting today.
And I'm Jay Brenchick. I'm the Director of Economic Development for the City of Auburn.
I'm Michael Cornwell, Director of Operations. I work closely with Nick on a lot of stuff within DAFs as well.
Great. And I'm Dan Matz. I think I know everybody here. I'm a staff member in GoPIF and doing a lot of the staff work for the AI task force. So helped bring a lot of this together.
All right. So, Dan, thanks for your work with the agenda for today. Appreciate the help with that. I think we just dive right in to keep things on time. First item was kind of a quick debrief of the public sector task force meeting, which was on June 25th. Takeaways, ideas, thoughts. Just to kind of start it off, I was really interested and impressed by the ingenuity and the thought around how this can be very transformative in the way that public sector provides services to its constituents. There's a lot of good ideas there. Dan just posted the reminder of our charge questions in the chat as well. And then there's the two more, right? There's I can't recite them, but there's the two that the entire group needs to answer.
It's essentially it's innovation and risks. So I will put those in there too. Yeah.
So I know, Michael, you didn't get a chance to see the 625 meeting, so that's fine. But Dan, Jay, just kind of your thoughts.
So I was one of the people who was presenting, so of course I thought it was fabulous. I think it was great hearing from the municipality in California. In some ways they're way ahead of us, in other ways it's the direction I think we were planning on heading in, at least in Auburn, as far as utilizing AI for planning, permitting, and code to make things more efficient. I think really we were able to share some good ideas of ways that AI can be used, about specific ideas of the way the public sector or municipalities can use AI. I think because we ran out of time, one area that we didn't get to cover as much was Brian with Maine Municipal and I had shared with each other some ideas that we had regarding ways that, or maybe recommendations this group could make it to help make rolling out AI within the public sector easier, more palatable for folks. And so I wouldn't be speaking completely for him, but I could, after everybody else gives their input and things, maybe touch on that a little bit.
Great, thank you. And I see Andrew joined us. It's good to see you, sir.
Hey, folks. Nice to see you. Apologies for my delay.
You've made quite a trip so far this summer, I see.
Just, connectivity knows no bounds, Nick.
Awesome. We were just...
except for air conditioning. Apparently that does not get included.
I was thinking that. Those little VWs aren't known for that. We were just kind of recapping our thoughts from the 625 task force meeting. Jay was just commenting on the use case that was presented from Corona, California, and kind of drawing some lines to Maine with that. I don't know if you have any thoughts that you'd like to share from that meeting.
I don't, apologies, and in fact, actually, I'm just as we're discussing, bringing up notes that my colleague Quinn captured from that conversation. I apologize, I wasn't able to join.
No worries. If you get caught up as we're making through, don't hesitate to just throw your hand up and jump in.
Great.
Dan, any reflections you wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just throw out a couple of thoughts. I'll plus one what Jay was just talking about, and I think Jay, I think the plan for somewhat of today's conversation is going to be thinking a little bit about that implementation idea and those sort of how questions of what are the ingredients needed to successfully do a lot of this rollout. And part of the reason that we asked Michael to sit in with us today was to think about that from a data side of things, but really to continue to try to drill down on some of the specific ways that that we can make things easier for state agencies, for municipalities, for all the groups that that are sort of doing in this public interest in this public service world to continue to leverage the powerful new tools. I wrote down. I think there was a really interesting moment in the meeting that we had in June with the larger group. As we got into the conversation, and we heard from the folks in New Jersey, and we heard from, as you said, the folks in California who are in some ways a little bit further out ahead of this from a sort of on the ground perspective. I had an interesting. I wrote down an interesting observation from Commissioner Gagne Holmes from the Department of Health and Human Services, who sort of said, like, a lot of this sounds great, and the sort of how do we even get started here, and what's the universe of things that really is going to make sense for us to roll out in a safe and responsible way. And of course, I'm paraphrasing here, but what's the universe in the ecosystem of use cases that is really going to be helpful for our specific agency, and what is step one in order to get to step 10 and hitting publish here. And I think that's a really important question, and also I think really thematically relevant for this conversation I hope to sort of have today around implementation and sort of getting a little bit to the how of all of this. And I'll also just say I've been, over the course of the last couple of weeks, even since then, I've come across a handful of other examples and things that might be interesting for us to look at. So just to preview that, as we keep going, I might be peppering things into the chat here that seem relevant, but I'm excited to dig into it.
All right.
I got a quick question. Was the agenda sent out and I missed it?
I believe I put it in the actual calendar invite, but I'll throw it right in the chat.
Okay.
Right
No,
here.
I can just go look at the calendar invite. I apologize.
No worries. It was about 25 minutes before we got on the calls. Yeah, slid right in there.
Shape shifting things a little bit right up to
yes.
time. All right. So great. We'll keep this conversation at the forefront and be thinking about it as we kind of work our way through the agenda. I know one of the topics that we've touched on a lot is data, and having our data be in a scenario that's prepared and ready to to be consumed by AI models. And Michael Cornwell has joined us today from DAFS. He's the Director of Operations for DAFS. He works closely with the state CIO and the IT organization, and also very closely with the state's I'd say maybe still considered newly hired Chief Data Officer. He's been with us, about 6 months now, Michael? Yeah. So Roger couldn't be here today. So Michael came in. Michael really started laying the groundwork for a lot of the data governance, data management program while he tried to hire a chief data officer at the same time. So he's very well versed in what the state has been doing in terms of getting that program up off the ground. So wanted to give Michael some time to kind of talk about Maine's data preparedness and governance process, and then what sort of data infrastructure the task force should consider recommending. So Michael, I'll give you the floor.
And thank you. Thanks, Nick and Dan, for inviting me here in Rogers Place. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quickly. There is just a larger overarching strategy that we have, and that drives what we're doing and why we're doing it. So if everyone can see, I have a slide deck up. It is our roadmap. This is for the executive branch within state government. So it does not apply to the legislature or the judicial branches. But, and I think, Dan, you have seen a version of this, right? This was attached to our annual report. It asked us to think about in short, medium, and long-term goals about how we're going to effectively implement data governance. Legislation was passed a while back in 2021 that actually created the data governance program, but it didn't have a fiscal note attached to it. So we've had to adapt and think about ways to actually put ourselves in a situation where there's demand for data governance and also that we're meeting all the statutory compliance stuffs. When we talk about readiness for AI specifically and how this roadmap works, the biggest two pieces are metadata management and data quality management right off the bat. They have the best value. One of the things right now that we're doing is this week, while Raj on vacation, myself and a member of the project management office are going to be meeting with our procurement team to find out which tools and professional services state agencies are already using, if they are using any. That's an inventory of any data cataloging efforts that are currently underway. And what that does is that tells me which ecosystems they're all in. Secondly, in August, we're going to be meeting with our Bureau of Human Resources team. We have a new enterprise learning management system called Lumen that'll be launching, I believe, at the end of this month. August, yeah. We have the meeting on August 13th. I apologize. And what that'll do is it'll tell us if there's any data literacy trainings. I know there's a series already. I just need to make sure that they're good quality enough to actually count for entry level, intermediate, and advanced for data literacy. That's the foundational work. That's something that I think if we test that out, we find that there's value in it. There may be a way for municipalities to piggyback on that. We're not sure yet. I don't know the limitations of that Open Sesame catalog or how the licenses work. So I will have that in mind when I demo that with our Bureau of Human Resources to figure out what resources are available. So that would give us a potential way of skilling people up to the point where they understand basic data governance principles, or help the ones who've already started that, and then fine tune the ones already in an advanced state. The second thing, and you'll see on the roadmap here, is phase number one, which is policies and standards. Right now, there is no executive branch data governance policy for the state. A draft was submitted to the Data Governance Working Group, which is the group that was established as a result of legislation that the Chief Data Officer reports up to on a quarterly basis. That draft we will have ready by probably mid or late September. It'll be enough time, or August. It'll have enough time for people to review that going into a data steward workshop that we have planned in September. So policies and standards will show the rules of engagement, how this federated model that we have planned is going to work at an implementation level at agencies, at bureau and agency level. And then it also has roles and responsibilities for data stewards. The other thing is, operationalizing what you're going to do for data governance. If you're a municipality, it may be that, you're in the, the county building or the city building. You've got to worry about all your satellite agencies. Maybe you have one IT director in a large agency or office, and some are just people who are doing whatever they can because it's another hat as assigned. So that effort is it's an evolving process. What I will say at the state, though, is that we're laying the foundation for that. What all this does, though, is it gets us in a position. Let's stop sharing now, if that's all right. Gets us in a position where we're able to look at whether or not it makes sense to use a single enterprise tool or a suite of tools to do data cataloging. We completed a pilot in May and June with a consulting company. And they gave us a pretty good, a template that people can use to at least think about data governance and data cataloging activities. It's a very high level. It doesn't do the 13,000 different elements and data attributes that are inside of a system. It does what's humanly possible. But it gets people in a position where they understand why we're doing what we're doing and how to do it well, so that it can be repeated across larger systems throughout their purview. When you have those in place and people feel comfortable using that tool, it's in Excel. Everybody has that already. The question then becomes, is there a best fit tool for the state to use? And then you have to skill people up to do that. So when you do that rollout, if there's an enterprise tool that gets adopted, you need to make sure that everyone has some type of training to use it. The thing about a federated model is that Raja and myself, neither one of us has access to any of the systems, right? We don't have the ability to get into the Office of Family Independence's, I don't know if it's, I think it's OFI Katahdin, right? Any Baxter, any of the other systems at the ACEs, we don't have access to any of those things. And for many of you, I assume it's the same. At a macro level, you may know what's going on, but you can't get in and affect change within the systems themselves. That's why you need individual data stewards to recreate that on a smaller scale. During that pilot, we looked at two different groups. One was the CDC group within the Department of Health and Human Services. The other one was the Office of Cannabis Policy within our own Department of Administrative Financial Services. And what we can say is that, having people who have a dedicated data analyst role makes a huge difference in the quality and outcomes that we've seen so far. And not every agency has the ability to afford those resources. They may see themselves first and foremost as, we fix potholes, we do construction projects, we don't necessarily do data. Or we solve, environmental pollutants. We make sure that drinking water is safe. We don't do this necessarily. But it all touches on that. And so part of it is the organizational change that goes with that. In a leadership role, if you go back to the diagram again, it's not too boring for everybody. The item that's sprinkled on everything is down at the bottom here. It just says OCM, organizational change management and communication. That's necessary because a lot of people don't see data as their role. They don't see data cleanup or data management as their role. And where I'm going with this and how this ties back to data governance is that it's about confidence and trust. So if you're using AI tools and some of the results come back as hallucinations or it generates slop, it's probably 9 out of 10 times it's because of poor data quality, or you don't have the right tags in your metadata to help you sort and catalog things correctly. That's why in our 5-point model, two of those most important things, the ones you get the best return on investment for early on when you're adopting AI tools, are metadata management and then data quality management. And on ours, we have them staggered. One starts in 2026, assuming that there's surety of funding. The other begins also in 2026, but they have overlapping horizons. One wraps up around 2028, the other one continues on to 2030 and possibly beyond. So the short answer is this: you can lay the foundation, you can skill people up, you can look at the landscape, you can acquire tools. In the meantime, we already have an AI policy that allows for certain technologies that are whitelisted by the CIO and that team. We feel confident those things are going to be safe to use. You still have to have a human in the loop when you're doing these things. It's not like you can just trust at face value everything gets generated by an AI tool. And as long as people understand that, we're in a safe space. The risk comes in where you are using it to make risky, decisions that involve millions of dollars or someone wearing an orange jumpsuit. If someone could suffer as a result of an outcome that is generated by a machine and there's no human check to that, then there you go. But it comes back to what we were talking about, where you need to skill people up, assess your existing landscape. And I don't know if it's the same thing as with the municipal association. I think you mentioned, Jay, are you the city of Auburn? Yeah, you're muted, but I understand. I saw you nod your head, right?
Yeah,
So the idea is that within your municipality, you have various champions who are excellent about this, who are just chomping at the bit to use AI. What it may come down to, though, is that are they actually ready, in the sense that are there tools there? Are their staff prepared for that? Do they understand the risks associated with it? Is there something that's just plug and play that's safe? One of the issues with data quality management and tagging right now is that, and Nick can correct me if I'm wrong, when we were doing last year's activities for data governance, one of the things was identifying the availability for use and potential quality of 12 different key demographic data fields. What we got back though is that various people, they didn't know how it was expressed in their systems. They didn't know how available it was, and some didn't even know if they tracked that at all. So it requires people to be literate in data governance, not necessarily to use the tools, but just to be able to say with confidence that what they're doing has a net impact or can be used to help programs and services, cut down on wait times, cut down on people being re-traumatized by having to tell their story over and over again to qualify for a service or a product. There are a lot of good uses for it. And I think as long as we keep our eyes on that, we'll be fine. But that foundational approach of assessing your landscape, seeing what tools are out there currently. I don't know within the city of Auburn if there are people who already have the tools. If you have a department that is well funded versus others who might already be further down that road than others, we found a fair amount of the asymmetry and siloing already in that process. And as we export that, the pilot that we just did on a macro level, we get funding for that. I assume we're going to see a lot of that, and that's perfectly okay. We expect that. Whatever people are doing right now in the absence of a data governance strategy, especially as it relates to generative AI tools, is what their current practice is. So the trick then is to harness that energy by saying, we're going to provide you with a basic set of rules to operate under, either having a whitelist of approved AI technologies like we already have with the state of Maine, and or having some type of training that goes with that. I know that Nick and his team are looking at doing that to help people, especially users of that, how it would impact things like Freedom of Information Act, copyright infringement. There's a whole bunch of other areas where you need to be careful about that. So that's, in a nutshell, that's where we're at right now. We've accomplished quite a bit. Most of it's reporting, laying down drafts of policy. We're engaging with our agency stakeholders on a regular basis now. Going forward in the next week or so, we're going to be ramping up those meetings. The operating model also gets unveiled. And there's that introductory workshop about that. But behind the scenes, as I mentioned, we're looking at all the existing landscape, like who's using which tools in professional services, is what the fee or license structures are for that, the vendor and the tool being used for that, because sometimes they're not the same thing, and how to get those agencies that are well funded to see the value of possibly having an enterprise system. And if that works, great. If not, we should still provide an enterprise offering for the agencies that are lower funded that can't afford to do that on their own. That I think is the cornerstone of that strategy. Dan's giving me like the, yeah, I know, but also like, oh, the price tag. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I get it. All right. Does anyone have any questions about that? I know it's a broad category and I didn't lay out concrete specifics. Oh, there's one last piece to this. In addition to having a broad data governance policy to use for our federated model, think of it like a franchise, right? You have at the executive branch level within the state, you have the chief data officer. Individual agencies, especially the more complex ones, might have agency level data officers who are then responsible for corralling all the different agency data stewards and coordinating those activities among them. At the state level, though, we'll also be providing standards. Those are the more technical things that tell you how to do this thing. It ought to be formatted this way. At the very least, it has to contain these elements to be true or to be accurate. Because of the sheer number of systems involved and the fact that we can't poke around in them, they're not going to be too detailed. They're not going to be overburdening. They're not going to be that complicated. But what they will do is force the agency data stewards and data officers to actually be able to peek under the hood and figure out what those elements are. And that results in better quality down the road. That's how you can trust the AI tools later on. Our timeline, our horizon for that isn't until 2030. Just so you know, I mean, we can use tools in between now and then, but to actually cut down on risk and to increase trust, it's looking at around 2030 for us.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
Yep.
Any questions from the participants?
I think I just have maybe a comment, and that is, if I'm to understand, one of the biggest major concerns our head of IT has is around data governance. And so anything that can be provided for guidelines or to help at the municipal level, you might have one or two municipalities that have a really large IT department, but truthfully, most departments are very small. I mean, ours is 3 people. And if I take a step back and just look at when it comes to prior to AI, just when it came to vendors reaching out to localities who have various software that's going to save their, be the savior of all things, and then the reality of trying to implement that and the issues that come up, even with very popular, well-known things like things through Civic Plus or like Munis and InterGov and those things, and the implementation ends up being a bigger challenge than expected, and then some of the security issues around that. So now that we take the step into AI, we're already getting inundated by vendors utilizing AI, saying we're going to be able to solve your permitting problem. We're going to be able to solve this. We're going to be able to solve that. And I think a lot of us are sort of like deer with our eyes in the headlights, just saying, okay. And so the data governance portion is, I think, probably, if you're the head of IT, that's your top thing. And then you've got all your department heads pounding at your door saying, oh, I need to implement this. I want to do this to help with permits or help with economic development or whatever. And so I almost feel like this is actually the most important portion of, it's the foundation.
It is.
And it has the ability to really go awry if not done right. So
What I will say though is to your point, I trust our IT team at the state level. Nick and his team have done a fantastic job of doing that. A business acceleration team looked at all the pros and cons, and they came up with a white list of technologies they feel are safe to use that are not trained on internal data. We have a lot of unstructured data in the form of the Microsoft Office suite, right? Tons of that. And you have no idea what's on any given person. As a matter of fact, even our security team can't really peer into what is in any individual person's OneDrive. So if I have a whole cache of those security numbers in there, they're not going to detect that. That won't appear on a scan. To your point, though, a federated model may not work for your municipality. And I know that Dan's doing extensive work to engage with other municipalities, other states, and Raja has as well, to find out what models they've employed, because some of them are top down, some of them have a direct line to their governor, and they're part of the cabinet directly, and they're influencing those policy decisions. The reason why we chose a federated model for ours is that per state statute, Maine revised statutes, agencies own their data. So we're not asking them to pony up data. We're not asking them to do anything that is illegal or immoral. We're asking them to work with the data they have and make it better. And it's a force multiplier because, as you pointed out, although you have three IT professionals, they may not be the ones doing the actual day-to-day work in those systems. So while they might be able to look at a problem, diagnose it, or work with a vendor on that, they couldn't tell you necessarily what a cleaned up record looks like in that system right now. And that's what you want to have, is the people who do the work on a regular basis, at least one or two of them were hands in every day, maybe even not admin level, but at least people who understand it, to be able to look at a record and go, yes, that is the single record. It matches. When I do an input in a report, the output is the same. It's consistent. I can see the lineage. I know, quality in, quality out, right? And that cuts down, like I said, on the hallucinations and potentially the slop, because it weeds out. It says you're trained on these things, and we know the ingredients are wholesome. They're certified organic, right?
Yeah.
Andrew?
Couple things here, and certainly want to be mindful of time and agenda categories here. First of all, Michael, thank you so much for that overview and time. I think some of the sort of cornerstones of which you're touching upon are just so critical for how they get reflected in this committee's reflection back to the task force at large. And I just want to make sure that we're elevating them, because I think the notion of data governance, consistency, and human capacity at multiple tiers sort of is cross-cutting amidst many of the conversations. And so one, I almost feel like, and it's one of those things in a safe space of a subcommittee. I'm glad to be able to say, like, I would love more on an overview of the overall data management, data governance strategy and policy at large, because I mean, that should be the starting point. And frankly, that Raj's team's needs should be elevated as a sort of starting point for informing so many of the recommendations here. So it's a really helpful snapshot, and I almost feel like, to the extent that we can get a distilled version and key set of priorities, both whether it's the subcommittee or whether it's the broader group, it has such significant implications for not just IT departments and any of the sort of super users across data management platforms, but it spills into how teams are looking at engagement, how agencies are looking at procurement of things beyond software. And so I feel like the principles of data governance, data literacy are ones that would be well served to amplify from what the state's already doing. Which means that we should have a better understanding of what is already happening. And like, again, I know that you all are full throttle all the time. And so I'm ashamed and embarrassed that I'm not more familiar about it. But I feel like would be a useful opportunity to embed in at least the recommendations of the task force. And I really just want to double click as well on the sort of both that standardization and expectations of data literacy and building from increased governance and standards, but across multiple levels. And I think in part because as public sector, from state to regional to local, utilizes both more intentional data analysis and all of the models and tools that are becoming more accessible, that has an immediate impact from an external constituent standpoint. And so that is, in a couple years, let alone a couple months' time, municipalities and local government that are using AI tools for engagement and constituent services are going to see an expectation of reflective use both within government and outside of government, which ultimately becomes an expanded digital literacy, digital equity issue, of which we already have significant challenges just based upon our population demographic and rurality. So I think the notion of dedicated and ongoing professional accreditation and incentivization for the use of tools and models and to be able to build around those is a area of really useful focus. And I think, again, stemming from how the state is already approaching that from either the federated model or from the use of existing vetted and allowed tools. And I think that it would be a very rich area to mine and extrapolate within recommendations.
I appreciate that, Andrew. There's one thing I forgot to mention, which is parallel to the work we're doing right now in policies and standards is a data sharing agreement template. So right now, Maine IT has had a data exchange policy in effect for the state of Maine's executive branch for a long time. What we've seen from some of the samples that we've gotten back, though, from participants in that group, the two examples we've seen don't adhere to that on the technical requirements, the privacy requirements. So creating something that's just plug and play for them it reduces the barriers. It doesn't mean you have to have a PhD in this. You were talking about credentialing and all that. I know one of my big concerns is that if we're not scaling them up, attracting that talent from the wild is going to be really hard to do because everybody wants data. Everybody wants, like right now, what was it? The war for AI talent right now is so competitive that Microsoft, Google, like it's a bloodbath. They're just trying to outdo each other to draw that person for one more year, right? We're not going to be in that competition, but by having at least tools that are easy to implement, that everybody can understand, that apply to 80% of the use cases and data sharing types, and they can also be used with the university system, K-12, municipalities. Anytime any state agency is a party to that, either on the transmitting or receiving side of that template can be used. So it has value, especially for agencies that don't have the time, they don't have dedicated staff to do this. They can just use it, be comfortable with it, have peace of mind knowing that it covers all the legal bases, right? That's what you're talking about, mining that space, making sure that you have accountability baked in, also giving people a chance to not run with it, but be cautiously optimistic, embrace that change, move forward with it.
Well, and just to double click on that, I think part of it is I feel like with new technologies and new tools, the more people use them, the more they get used, and the more everyone else learns around. Yeah, the more everyone learns that collective capability, and it becomes less amorphous around just standardization and governance and more about, okay, for this function of activity, we use these tools, which prompted insights and challenges along these lines. And it both creates incentives for people to do good work and to create tools that increase efficiency. And then for understanding what that looks like and adapting policies accordingly. So I think there's that huge, then, it's one thing to have a unique skill set. It's another thing to be able to develop something new that is used, that is highlighted, and that gets built upon.
I'm laughing a little bit, Andrew, because you and Michael together are very prescient in terms of the conversation you're having and how much it will relate to the conversation that the larger task force is planning for Wednesday around expanding AI literacy beyond the four walls of government to the whole sort of universe of folks. So just Scott and I have been deep in the weeds on that topic over the last couple of weeks. So definitely would encourage continued conversation on that, amongst the bigger group here. I also I had a question, just sort of trying to bring this back a little bit to the goals of the group and coming back to recommendations that the task force might consider, and think sort of filtering that through the presentation, Michael, that you just gave us. I guess I have sort of a couple of different questions here to throw out into the world, without great answers, but hopefully the smart people on here can help flesh those out a little bit. I think, firstly, there's a sort of a bucket. I think Nick even mentioned this at the beginning here, but as the task force considers adopting recommendations and publicizing recommendations and using sort of a little bit of an opportunity with hopefully some limelight to shine a light on some of these issues, I would encourage you, Michael and Nick and others, to think about what kind of recommendations would be helpful in moving this work forward and moving this work forward more efficiently and quickly. I know these things take a long time, but if it's helpful to have a group like this AI task force come in and say, doubling down on things like cross-agency data sharing templates or using translating the work that you're spending years doing here into a municipal context that folks like Jay can then take back to their data people and say, if we just basically plug in the word Auburn here with our folks, like where can we, I think if it's, I would definitely just encourage sort of us to be able to build on the great work that's already happening and also supercharge the work in a way that might be helpful to you all. So that's one piece. The second piece is around this work on the work you discussed around the sort of data governance working group and how that functionally is sort of moving through this. And I think Nick and Scott and I and others have had a couple of conversations over the last year and a half or so around the broadening of the lens a little bit here to the kinds of folks whose voices might be valuable in conversations around data and AI and certainly public sector use of these tools. And so I'm as I think about a suite of recommendations that might come out of this task force work, curious to hear reactions to like making that group sort of beyond sort of just technologists and into sort of policy folks and other, does my question here make sense in terms of how this work moves out forward into the future and continues to be able to allow the state and our state folks to be flexible and nimble and coming up with the answers to the speed of these rapidly approaching technologies?
Dan, I will say that the data governance working group in and of itself is more policy focused. Its members are not highly technical in nature, most of them. I think Raja being the most technically inclined of that group. Yeah. We're going to be inviting Nate Williger, who's the Chief Information Security Officer, to be a permanent member of that group, though, going forward, because the intersection of privacy, security, and data governance are manifold. With that having been said, that the operating model that we're going to be unveiling, it has that data governance working group. Below that are the implementation. That's those agency data stewards, data officers, and as needed, data officers or data stewards will be asked to participate or present in front of that larger group to help guide some of the decision making involved. We also have an external feedback process we need to solidify by the end of the year, and then there is, in the current version of that operating model, there is a dotted line with the AI task force providing input to that data governance working group, because we talked about this, I think, back in, I want to say February. We need to know what the other hand is doing, both of us, because there's a lot of interdependency and a lot of overlap between this group and what that group is working on. So
yeah.
Dan, I think, your comment for me, one thing that resonates is the fact that, and this is a little inside baseball, but you probably have a good understanding of how IT is structured in the state of Maine. And, I think AI has the opportunity to be so transformative, and it also is going to demand a lot of resources in terms of people, but also a financial investment to make the difference that we ultimately want to make. So I think to your point about that broader group I think those are more the deciding those folks are the people that are really kind of deciding on those use cases, right? And having to make the tough decision to say, use case number one is absolutely the best resource to put our staff time and our funding into at this moment, because we can't do them all at once, can't do them all at the same time. So for me, that's one of the things I'm looking for, is for that transformation to kind of happen, where there's a group that's probably not the most technical, as Michael, because you need those policy folks that really understand the business exceptionally well, and then understand, the budget climate and all the other pieces to say, this is the right place to put our limited resources now.
This conversation is prompting more questions for me, just in thinking about, I find myself realizing, feeling less clear about maybe conversations already happening through a data governance committee, is it a data governance and management working group?
Yeah, it's data governance working group. But what we found is that there are multiple different data groups, right? Some agencies have had these forever. There's one that GOPIF is part of. It's a longitudinal study about outcomes for youth. There is one that the state economist has with external stakeholders, right? There are many data conversations going on. Not all of them are visible. Some of them are internally, done with agencies. So one of the reasons why we need to have that engagement piece is to find out exactly where these pockets are, and not to we're not going to stomp them out. We want to encourage them. We just want to make sure that we're aware of what they're going through, because they form these groups for a reason, right? To go through what they're either, as Nick was pointing out, what their best use cases are, or how to make that picnic with just a tiny little budget.
Yeah. I love a good picnic reference. So thank you for inviting more. it makes me think about sort of the federated model that you are articulating, and I'm wondering if whether it's now or in follow-up for this subcommittee, if we can think about getting a sense of what that looks like so that we then layer whatever is the appropriate set of literacy learning standardization on that, because I think then that serves as a baseline set of buffet ingredients that any of those, and I'm sorry to be reflecting back to you probably what you already said, but just that like baseline set of ingredients and or formulas, recipes, etc., that any existing data working group, right? So we have 3 different versions of a data working group on different topics and issues too. And it's useful to be thinking about how to factor in, vetted and approved models and technologies, existing enterprise subscriptions that allow for sidecars, having that as like a chart or frame of reference within even recommendations of this subcommittee to factor into the overall set of recommendations around user capability, I think would be really helpful.
To piggyback on that, there are also some of the agencies we've been working with. I know the Department of Education in particular had technical assistance being provided by a grant, and those folks were laid off at the federal level when those funds were frozen. So I don't know if that has played out in numerous agencies. I assume it has. So what that does is for people who were just learning and getting up to speed, this sets them back. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. They lose a little bit of progress. The learning is harder and slower. The lessons, become more blood, sweat, and tears rather than, oh, I get it now and I can reverse engineer this. They learn through, oh my gosh, this was risky. That I don't know why I did that. How do we prevent that from happening again? We want to avoid those if possible, and that's where those skill up, those data literacy things come in. You were talking about potential certifications. I'm not averse to any of the ideas, but right now, a data steward, a data officer, these are not dedicated roles. They are hats on top of existing positions, just like a records officer is. So when we make that recommendation, I don't think it's feasible for every agency to have a data officer, by the way. I think, some may not. Some certainly wouldn't have data. They'd all have data stewards, but not every one of them would warrant a data officer to help coordinate all the different, bureaus and offices and stuff like that. And when Raja's back and we've ironed out some of the operating model stuff, I doubt he would have any problem sharing that with you guys to show you what that larger model looks like when you implement it at the executive branch level and then down to the agency, bureau, office, division, unit, right? Because that's really where you find out how much skill you need in a specific area. Most of it isn't highly technical to begin with. As it gets further along that process, though, right now, the work that we started last year, we had over 120 data officers identified. And the thing is that a lot of them had different life experience. They ranged between deputy directors all the way to office technicians in terms of their positions. Ironically, the office technicians probably have more hands-on ability to look at systems and get in there. They might have more access than your deputy commissioner would. So, but they don't have the decision-making authority. One of the things that we talk about is whomever this person is, whatever their actual position is within the agency, they have to have at least the ability to make decisions regarding data governance that benefit their agency, unless there's some high stakes, $1 million newspaper, orange jumpsuit, right?
Yeah.
All right. Might be a good time to transition to our next item on the agenda. And Michael, thank you.
Thank you guys so much for hosting me here. I'm long-winded.
Thank
I
you.
apologize. It's something I'm really passionate about.
It's
Helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon, gentlemen. Bye.
All right. Kind of the next bullet that we had put together on the agenda was kind of a conversation around hiring and upskilling talent, and how can the public sector attract talent around deploying AI and improving service delivery. If anybody, I can kind of give a little bit of background at the state in terms of some of this challenge outside of AI, but if anybody wants to jump in closer to this now, feel free. All right. So I'll give just a little background in terms of, because as I'm sure everybody, Jay, you commented earlier about size and scope of, a town or a city's IT department. And, working in the public sector is different than working in some of these large, private firms that we all know the names of. What we've done over the years, because we have struggled a little bit over the years, just in terms of IT talent and skill sets that are carrying a lot of the transformational, understanding of what we need in the world today of IT. Things like moving away from traditional owned data centers and servers racked in data centers to cloud hosting environments and cloud native workloads, and going from traditional hardware-based networking to software-defined networks. Those transitions have created some challenges for the state to recruit staff and get staff. And some of the different ways that we've kind of worked to challenge that is, we've looked at the education segment. We've created an internship program where we pull interns from UMA. We've done some work with Kennebec Valley Community College, actually inviting them to come in and host classes at the state to train and get certifications to, in certain areas for state employees that currently work in IT. Work to create a lot of excitement around, the benefits and the positive points of working in the public sector that don't directly relate to your monthly salary, right? There's a lot of benefits. I've worked in the public sector for 21 years, and it's been incredible being able to be at my daughter's field hockey games and daughter's softball games. That's not always highlighted when you're trying to recruit staff. So trying to get people interested and excited about public service early on in their education career, trying to train others, at a point in their career to make the shifts into the different new and emerging technologies. We've done a lot with our Bureau of Human Resources and in the size and scope of what they can do in terms of recruiting to make sure we're reaching out to all corners of the internet to make sure that our postings are current and relevant to folks that are out looking for jobs now, and sound appealing and exciting to them in hopes that there's a level of excitement from the idea of public service coming back at us. We have been successful in some of those endeavors, and we've still continued to have challenges in some of those endeavors. I have 2 positions right now, not for AI, but for another discipline that I've been working for the last 9 months to recruit and fill. And they're really important positions and we need them, but it's extremely challenging trying to recruit against the private business world and the salaries that are offered, and the fringe benefits that are offered in that space, stock options, bonuses, that sort of stuff. In the end, we'll get somebody eventually. We'll find a resource, and that resource might be, 70% of what we hoped it would be. And that's where we have the other programs that we will put in place where we'll hire somebody we think has the aptitude and the attitude and some of the experience, and we'll invest in them and train in them and hope that we get time out of them after all of that, at least 3, 4, 5 years, back into the organization and back into the mission at hand. It's kind of some of the stuff we're doing. We are applying some of this to our AI positions. I have a AI Center of Excellence director posted right now we're recruiting for, that will be the first person to start really, they will have 100% focus on the AI work. Michael and Raja have been doing some of it in terms of data. Nathan's been doing some of it in terms of security, but this position is going to kind of pull it all together. and really create a focus. And if I remember correctly, I think we have another position that will become available in October that will also feed into the AI Center of Excellence. It's it's going to be a bit of an iterative thing. We'll hire these folks. We'll try and get as much as we can off the CV and into the work, but we know we're going to have to spend time training and upskilling as well as we move forward. There's just too much there.
I think my thoughts are very similar to what you are already doing, Nick. But then when I look at the local municipal level, it's sort of like I keep on going back to this for the local municipalities needs to work together type of thing. And in real general terms, I think I am somebody who likes the idea of regionalism or something along those lines. And that's kind of influenced by the fact that while I grew up in Maine, I was doing economic development in Virginia and Florida, and those are governments where the county handles most of your government activities and your cities and towns a little less. And it's a lot more efficient in my mind, having been there versus here, where you've got, a town of 1,500 people and a town of 3,000 and a town of 1,000, and you've got all these positions essentially doing the same thing. And when you're talking about professionals for AI and trying to recruit them, certainly all the things you mentioned as far as quality of life, giving back to the community, all those things are good. But at the same time, unless we're pooling resources, I don't know that we can meet the salary requirements of some of these people, especially if you are young and you're getting right on top of it now. The type of salary you'll be able to command in just a few years after having completed 3 years at the Rue Institute, suddenly you're able to step into $250,000 and up a year jobs in the private sector. How do we compete with that in the public sector? And that's, I don't know if it takes using our councils of governments, or if it's Maine municipal, helping to kind of pair communities. But there's got to be a way to harness this stuff as a verse to everybody going, doing their own thing when it comes to hiring, especially with the AI, because those people are going to, an economic developer is worth what an economic developer is worth. I'm not going to leave here and suddenly make $500,000 somewhere else because I switched to private sector. But you can, I think, when it comes to AI.
Yeah. Go ahead, Andrew.
Sorry, Nick. I don't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, you're all set. Go ahead.
Boy, you miss one meeting or so and then just feel light years behind. So sorry if this has been sort of already articulated in previous either committee or subcommittee discussions. If I should know this otherwise, you mentioned was it Director of Artificial Intelligence Center of Excellence?
Yep.
As a position. I mean, it seems like I apologize. I don't think I had that on the radar, but I would imagine that the function of that position addresses many of the needs and priorities that both Michael was talking about and that we would want to amplify from a report and committee standpoint. Is that, so I guess the question would be, if that's already in motion, what, I mean, there's the broader hiring challenge and complication, which I'm hearing you say, but then there's also the question of what is needed to ensure the conditions of success for that position and hierarchy of standardization that
Michael was talking about. And again, I'm so sorry if all this has already been talked through and I'm just like way behind the times. But it seems like one of the things that I just want to make sure we're doing is if that's already in motion, then we should really be amplifying it as one of the outputs, outcomes, priorities out of this subcommittee and task force priorities. But again, maybe I'm like way behind. I'm sorry.
You know, I don't think you are. I think we mentioned at one point. In fact, I'm pretty certain, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty certain this position was noted to be a member of the technical subcommittee. Unfortunately, hiring being what it is, I think I was maybe a little more, little more excited about the fact that it would be filled quickly, and you know, it's taken its time to get filled. So, but to your point, you know, that the position is going to help really kind of organize and take, like Michael said, people are wearing multiple hats. Is to take some of the hats off and let them just sit on the right person, the one person's head. Um, I think you touched on something that I was going to respond to Jay with, which is in terms of, you know, how do we leverage, you know, if one of us is successful in enticing somebody with a strong skill set to come in and lead some AI efforts, how do we make the most out of that resource? Obviously, without, you know, not without spreading them too thin, but how do we make the most out of that resource that benefits a lot of people? And you know, I touched on it before. I talk about the state and local cybersecurity grant program. We've been, you know, lucky to engage with a lot of municipalities and a lot of school districts where we've been able to share predominantly funding, but specifically through tools and things that are easily sent out to those groups in order to leverage. And my hope would be that that model will kind of continue in the AI space. I see what Jay is talking about and recognize that, you know, we have in other states, you have that more regional approach to this work, and it's less, you know, in Maine, it's, I don't know, it's in the hundreds in terms of municipalities, right? 400, over 400, I think. But whereas you might, you know, if you're talking about counties, now we're down to 16 counties. I still think that there's an opportunity, though, as we dive deeper and have a better understanding of AI, and we have a better understanding about how we look at constituents engaging with their government, whether it's their county, their town, their state, you know, how we're really good about making decisions and use cases and what has the best impact for the constituent, that position or those positions at the state can help lean into the towns and the counties to help with that work. Some of it might be, you know, the idea of we're doing this on the security side. We're sharing security training with the towns and municipalities that has been very impactful for the state in terms of people wanting to watch the content and understand the content. It may be an opportunity where we use that same methodology to deliver that AI literacy training. And we can deliver it in large scale to groups, and there isn't a massive cost that's being repeated over and over again across the platform. I don't think it's completely thought out yet, Andrew, but I think that's kind of where my vision is the ability to share that resource and to share that insight and to work together as a group, not the state and the counties and the municipalities, but all of us together to focus on how we all kind of approach this AI.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, Nick, I just really appreciate Dan and Scott about your collective approach is just how good you've been in, I think, harvesting the nuggets of things to build upon that are already in motion. And it just sort of seems like this shared cybersecurity training approach with both counties and municipalities is, you know, a simple one to amplify in support and in service to the new AI Center of Excellence, which then allows for, great, there's an existing practice where folks are familiar with. It's just a different flavor now. And so, I don't know, I'm sure you're already looking at building that out. But Nick, I just wanted to amplify. I feel like that is the kind of thing that addresses that data literacy capability at a hyper local level, which I think is going to be a major constraint as far as how folks are using expanded AI applications and anticipating or expecting any constituent related engagement associated with it.
The other thing is not occurring to me, but until now is your background before MCA, Andrew. And you and I talked years ago about how fellows can be deployed into projects in government to sort of solve problems where there was a talent gap of someone to move things forward here. I wonder if something like that is interesting here for the task force to consider, of an AI fellows program that partners community government, maybe some state agencies, and is a way to get 1 to 2 years of a high energy young professional to move a deployment project one step forward every day that otherwise the rest of us are, doing in our part-time. But that, hearing Jay talk about having resources, talking about how hard it is to hire, and think about your background, Andrew, I wonder if there's something there to be created.
I mean, I love that notion. I mean, I'm just making a note. There's good track record, right? I mean, there's the Climate Corps, Resilience Corps, Island Fellows, probably a couple others as well in different verticals. Obviously, funding threats to the Corporation for National Service and Volunteer Maine are factors to be aware of, but also worthwhile maybe looking at any public-private partnerships where there is private funding for that kind of leadership pipeline and public applications where the public sector is a useful learning lab. And, it's sort of like the old, I don't know, was it City Lab or approach where public sector frames a need and offers the ability for teams to come together to solve. But I think could be an opportunity for sponsorship via private sector partners of that pipeline development. And I bet there's an example elsewhere where technology companies or sector is providing sponsorship for that kind of effort.
That's interesting too. Yeah. There's Nick, do you guys ever interact with the Partnership for Public Service? Is that?
I have not.
So they're a national organization, a little bit different here, but they place early to mid-career technology professionals from private sector into government for time-bound deployments around big technology transformation, very similar to Fuse Corps, Andrew. So I think that is sort of one. I think there's a whole range here that we could think about of talent, for injecting talent using these partnerships into the IT functions, but also I think about the something that's more like the Climate Corps, Resilience Corps, Island Fellows are a little bit more like, they're less technical experts and more smart, enthusiastic young folks who want to go do good projects for the world. And I say that as saying, maybe we need both. Maybe we need an all of the above answer here, which is the task force should be recommending agencies really aggressively explore partnerships that bring in talent even in time-bound ways through fellowships and partnerships into agencies and into IT.
And can I just add an idea that's sort of, it's a cross-cutting idea that actually folks were talking about in the education subgroup, that seems very much in line with the conversation we're having here, which is around, in even probably more sort of focused and, to Scott's point, time-bound way, really leaning on university involvement to bring research and student sort of support and help, and less about sort of 1 to 2 year programs, and more like where can we find semester-long projects that to pull in student talent. And I think there's again, pulling from the education group, there was an idea of convening Maine's public and private universities to pitch them if projects like some of the ones that we're talking about here come up in state agencies, in Maine IT, in municipalities, in the COGS, at the county level, whatever it might be, and to say, here's a project that we're thinking about doing. Do you have someone who can help us fine tune it and go out into the world? So just wanted to flag the little overlap there in approach, I think, between some of the groups that the task force has put into place. I don't know, Jay, does something like this resonate with you as someone in a municipality, like the sort of fellowship, internship, student research model?
Yeah. And I mean, we try to partner with like when it comes to economic development, you try to partner with your institutions of higher learning because they're usually on the edge of the next thing when it comes to manufacturing or the other thing. So it just kind of follows along with that basic idea. I mean, they're the ones who are doing the training of our next generation. So just start working with them early is good. Certainly.
I would also say, Dan, I've often thought about the ability. I mean, AI is very transformative, and I think it's the right topic to kind of lean into it. I think maybe to some extent, early on we missed the boat with cybersecurity a little bit with it, but the idea that could we work with, and lucky for us, we have Ryan Lowe and President Diegler from the Maine Community College System on the task force. But could we work, around the longer term solutions in terms of the workforce, which would be, the associate, bachelor's, master's degree programs, and crafting what some of those might look like at public and if asked, private universities. But I think there's an opportunity there with this particular discipline that you're going to have a real viable career for the long term out the other end. Somebody told me once, I never validated this, but I certainly believed it in my travels, that many cybersecurity professionals carried more than one job because of the amount of work that was out there and the ability to do so. And it actually created a negative unemployment rate in cybersecurity. And if that was the case, then you could easily see AI happening, right? That happening in AI as well. There's going to be such a drive for business transformation with this tool that there's going to need to be expertise and pipelines for that.
Well, Nick, pulling on a thread a little, I think that says that references back to something that New Jersey's labor commissioner mentioned sort of in passing last month, where he talked about how every one of his employees has gone through like a 9-part AI skill training, which was, I had not heard them talk about that before. It was both a little intimidating, but I think also, I mean, our conversation thus far, I think, has really nicely focused on the need to resource IT and our central technology professionals who are kind of ensure there's the technical and data environment for agencies doing the AI work. We've talked about sort of fellows that I think a little bit of like sitting in agencies and helping do some of the change management or project delivery of some of these opportunities. And then this third leg around how do we upskill Maine state employees? Like, should there be a standard learning opportunity? Should we embark on every Maine state employee getting 10 hours of exposure to AI literacy topics by the next year? I'm curious, sort of teeing that up, I guess, is a question for you all of, we've talked about bringing in outside talent. What all to you might make sense in terms of upskilling existing talent in the state agencies that the task force should recommend?
I can tell you, I mentioned it earlier, but one of the things and some of you may have taken this, our cybersecurity training program, it's a product called Know Before, that is kind of cybersecurity hidden in kind of a quirky little cybersecurity training, hidden in kind of a quirky little like movie. And it's been hugely successful for us in terms of engagement. Believe it or not, we get emails asking when the next set of training videos are coming out because they want to hear the story. But this past year, one of the things we did was we did embed some very basic kind of AI training topics. I would say like very, very, very basic. And it wasn't in terms of the video, but it was like a worksheet, digital worksheet that happens, as you're progressing through the video set that's up at this current time. So state employees got a brief introduction in terms of, hey, we're going to be talking about AI. This is the basics of it. But as this continues to go, I talked about we've been doing a co-pilot pilot of 150 users in state government. We're doing a 150 user chat GPT pilot in state government. As this starts to progress more and more, people are going to need more and more training in terms of the product. And I think that that's absolutely one of the ways that we would go, Scott, is to continue to deliver, hopefully, as energetically as we've been delivering the cybersecurity training, the AI training. But I think it's something that's going to have to be delivered on a regular basis. People are going to have to be refreshed on a regular basis to keep it relevant, keep it in front of mind, and keep it current. And those are the platforms that I think are really easy to share with others.
Jay, how have you been thinking about this at the municipal? Like, is this part of the regular sort of digital training, or I've never worked for municipality. I'm not sure what the regimen looks like.
I would tell you right now for the city of Auburn, we haven't really rolled anything out. As part of our strategic planning, internal planning for next year, I know the conversation is about educating employees on AI, starting at that level, and then it's also about developing policy and all of that. But it's mostly surrounded about trying to get ourselves overall educated, all the staff members at various levels. And I think sometimes when something new like this comes out, you end up with your shining stars within your own staff that you know, suddenly they realize that, you know, we talk about being in the right seat. We could find that there's somebody working in public works who actually has a passion and an ability in this area. And it's not somebody within IT or somebody within finance or something. So we're kind of looking at training, internal training, and see what that reveals. Because we do like hiring from within. We do like working with people. We have a city manager who very much likes the idea of doing like 360 assessments of people to make sure that they're actually in the right spot. So I know that's kind of deviating sort of from what you said, but it's you know, anytime something new comes out, there are people who end up shining in it, and they're not always the ones that you know, if you just look to IT to help you solve this, you might not be looking at the right folks, if that makes sense.
I can't remember who said this, but in one of our meetings, it may have been Sachin from WEX, said some version of AI as a contact sport, which I always sort of reflect on as a really nice way of summing up exactly what you're talking about. You don't know who's going to be the person to latch onto this and really show an aptitude for it without giving people a chance to mess around with things in a safe and responsible way. So
yeah, and I guess it lends to the bigger picture. Like when I look at the all these subgroups, and you've got education, and you know, and then the bigger question about what can the state do to make sure that our citizens benefit from AI, as well as to mitigate the risks of AI, and it's all around education and training and learning. And so that applies at the municipal level as far as employees go.
Again, I'll put in a plug for this Wednesday, having an exact panel on exactly those kinds of questions. So I think continuing to wrestle with those moving forward here.
Just checking on time, we had put together a few minutes to talk about possible recommendations on how the state should develop or prioritize future use cases. And then we needed just a couple of minutes to wrap up, and I think we probably need to talk about a third meeting time too, right? So maybe we spend just a couple of minutes on the next bullet point. And I think we touched on a little bit of it, but if maybe we dig into it more, looking at potentially building on existing models. I mentioned the state and local cybersecurity grant program, incorporate cross-agency leadership, or establish public-private community of practice. And Washington State's noted here. And Dan, did you put that in the lower?
That may not have made it into the one that's here on the agenda, on the calendar hold, but I do have a couple of things. If I'm not sure, like Nick, if it's easier for us to have this be the first half of like what our third meeting ends up being, so people can reflect on a couple of agenda. I sort of, as Nick mentioned, we were sort of moving things around up until 10 minutes before we started here. So if it's helpful to send out a couple of other examples for people to have in their brain and react to before the next one, is that either way works, but I think if people are interested in that, you can definitely do that.
Yeah, that's good with me.
Yeah, that works.
That works.
All right, so we'll send out some we'll send out some pieces in the run up to our third meeting, which we do not have on the books right now. So just wanting to spend a couple of minutes here thinking about when would be a good version for that. I believe the co-chairs are expecting something like a sort of final draft product from this group by the end of the month. So if there's a time here in the next couple of weeks that we can find an hour or 90 minutes to all jump on the phone together to sort of put the finishing touches on things, that would be great.
Recognizing that I am assuming it is largely yourself that will be compiling
Largely.
recommendations. Do you want to give us a sense of just working backwards, what kind of timeline would be preferable from your standpoint?
I think anytime before the end of July is great. I mean, I've been taking notes during these calls. We have the ability, Nick and I have been looking at using Copilot to sort of do some summarization and things. So I don't think, the July 31st date is not a formal sort of due date here. It's kind of the date for myself and Scott to be able to go out and spend 6 weeks prepping things or really spend the month of August prepping things for everyone when we come back in September. So if there's a time the week of the 21st or the week of the 28th, I think and I'm also happy to follow up after the fact if people don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, I have availability both of those weeks. One of the things that I wonder, which then has you scrambling to do more work, but as averse to us throwing out more thoughts, I'm starting to find myself thinking in circles and then repeating myself, and I'm finding that that's not as valuable a time as what if you don't have to have it in any kind of real great form, but if you got to us the outline, just put it in AI and all your notes of potential recommendations so that we're looking at those and we're playing off of them as averse to, grasping at straws of things that we had mentioned before and couldn't remember, and that type of thing. It might make for a more informed sort of conversation where it's more useful that we're actually adding more to the conversation than just sort of repeating what we had said before.
That sounds great, and definitely don't ever feel bad about throwing more work on our plate. That's what we're here for.
With that said, I do have time available. I don't know about the other members of the group. If you want to just throw out, look at your calendars and then give us some options to pick.
Yeah, it looks like Andrew put on a 90-minute slot there on Wednesday the 23rd, right around the middle of the day, 11:30 to 1. That works on my end if there's a consensus there.
Yeah, that works for me.
The 22nd and the 23rd would be the 2 days that I can't. I already have a full day engagement both days.
All righty.
No problem.
But I was, where it's Monday now, I was looking at the 21st or the 28th. I don't know if the Monday scenario that we're already in, if that is beneficial to anybody.
I'm available from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on the 21st, and then the 28th, I'm pretty wide open.
Nick, any particular time in there look good?
I have some stuff on the 21st and the 28th, but in lieu of those 2 dates being blocked off for me, I will move what I have on the 21st or the 28th, whatever works for everybody. I can clear those Mondays.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually, let me go back to the 21st. I can clear those Mondays myself as well.
Why don't we say maybe, looking at Andrew's comment here too, what about later in the afternoon, 3 or 3:30 on the 28th? How does that sound, sort of closing out that Monday?
Beautiful.
Yep.
All right. I will send that out to everybody just as soon as we wrap up here. And to Jay's point, we'll arm you with something a little more formal going into that call for you to react to and sort of finalize hopefully all together.
Yeah, like just outline form of
Sure.
what we've thought of for recommendations so far.
Sounds good.
Walk through them together.
Perfect.
Okay.
All righty. Well,
thank you, everybody. Appreciate the conversation. Dan, Scott, thank you for helping
Thank you, Nick.
this behind the scenes. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks all.
Bye, everybody.